So on to this evening's topic. Now, Dr. Clare and I firmly believe that the best way to smash a taboo is to talk about it. And of all of the taboos around the menopause, sex is probably one of the biggest ones. Various studies have shown that anywhere from 40 to 50% of menopausal women experience a loss of sex drive, and around 1 in 3 experience vaginal dryness, also related to menopause. And I know from talking to Dr. Clare that she believes that this is massively underestimated, as very sadly, many women are too embarrassed to talk about these symptoms, even with their doctor. And so we're delighted to be joined this evening by 2 brilliant women and experts in their respective areas, Trudy Hannington and Eleanor Gardner. Trudy is a highly experienced senior psychosexual therapist. She leads a team of 4 psychosexual therapists at the Ledger Clinic in Doncaster and has worked in sexual health for over 25 years and specialised as a psychosexual therapist in 2002 after training at the Porterbrook Clinic in Sheffield. She also sees patients privately. Eleanor is a familiar face to the My Menopause Centre community. She founded Pelvic Relief in 2013, bringing together a range of products for pelvic health to manage conditions such as painful sex, incontinence, and pelvic pain. She also works as an ambassador for the Yes company, and you'll see later, Eleanor is going to show some of the products that can help in this area, and they're all available on her website as well. So, as you'll appreciate, the team here won't be able to answer individual specific medical queries, but they can, of course, respond on a broad level. Now, we've broken our conversation this evening into 2 parts. We're going to start by looking at the gynaecological symptoms that can cause pain and discomfort in general, and when having sex in particular, part to contemplate even enjoying sex if it's going to cause pain. And then we look at loss of sex drive, and of course, most importantly, we're going to look at the treatment options for both. So Claire, let's start with a question to you. We mentioned the British Menopause Society research where over 1/3 of women are experiencing vaginal dryness, and menopausal painful sex is something that people are searching for a lot on Google. What's your experience in terms of, seeing this in your clinics?
Yes, thanks, Helen, and good evening, everybody. No, I completely agree. I really believe that is an underestimation, because when I ask many patients about their menopause symptoms, they'll reel off many symptoms, including hot flushes and not sleeping, etc. But often they won't volunteer the vaginal symptoms unless you actually ask about it, which is a great shame, because often women, as you say, are suffering in silence, and there are lots of different ways that you can help those symptoms. So I think the first part of it is to understand why it's happening. And that's so with the loss of estrogen, as we go through the menopause, the vaginal tissue becomes drier, it becomes more delicate and sensitive, more prone to tiny little tears. The bacterial balance, because we have a family of happy bacteria that live happily in the vagina, and with the loss of estrogen, that changes. So you can get funny discharge, funny smells. And then also the loss of stretch at the entrance to the vagina is a particular issue for women when they're being sexually active. And so often dryness isn't the issue, it's that loss of elasticity and the shortening of the vagina that can also occur. So although women might find it embarrassing, we certainly won't. I'll have heard everything before and spades. And we might ask you exactly what you mean by vaginal dryness as well, or pain during sex, because sometimes we know from a really good Guardian article that was published a year or 2 ago now that many women use the term vagina, but actually they mean the vulva on the outside as well as the vagina on the inside. So it's just getting to grips with describing exactly what's going on, talking to your doctor or healthcare professional about it, and then being able to then seek help and move forward. And I think the other thing that can sometimes happen, which is really, really distressing, is if sex becomes a bit painful or a bit uncomfortable, the vaginal muscles, totally beyond the control of the brain, or your conscious control of the brain, sorry, I should say, then tighten up. So as something enters into the vagina, the smooth muscles around the vagina can squeeze and not allow that something in, whether it's a penis or a sex toy. And again, that can be incredibly painful and incredibly distressing. And again, you talking to somebody like Trudy, working with somebody like Eleanor to suggest techniques that can help that is really important. So really there's two bits to it. There's the estrogen bit, and then there's a knock-on effect of the estrogen bit.
And Claire, now that we understand, the causes of vaginal dryness and itchiness, when patients come to see you, what treatment options do you discuss with them, and how do you help them? How do you guide them or help them decide what the best option for them is?
Yeah, no, so the non-hormonal options that I know that Eleanor will be talking about, including lubrication and moisturizers, but I would be mentioning those and signposting to Eleanor's website, Pelvic Relief, and the Yes products, to name a few. But I'm mainly talking about vaginal estrogens. And that is an estrogen that goes directly into or around the vagina. And that would be either a tiny little pessary that comes on an applicator. It could be a cream that you put into the vagina and smear around, or it could be a little ring that you actually fit into the vagina and it stays there. So lots of different ways to deliver the estrogen. And often women are really anxious about using an estrogen, but you hardly absorb any of that into your body. And so there's no risk of breast cancer, no risk of heart disease, no risk of blood clots. And it's generally, for most women, a safe option and an effective option.
So Claire, I know there's often at these events and when you see patients in your clinic, there are a couple of questions that we often get. One is, can you take a vaginal estrogen with other forms of HRT? If you could take that. And then the second one is, can you take vaginal estrogens if you've had hormonal cancer? So what's your general advice and guidance for both of those?
Yes, yeah, no, well, we think almost 2/3 of women on HRT might need a vaginal estrogen as well. And it's fine. It's not giving you too much estrogen, and it's totally fine to use it alongside it. In terms of estrogen-dependent cancers like breast cancer, for example, and sometimes some forms of ovarian cancer. So the issue is that there's a bit of a dearth of evidence telling us that it's safe. But there is lots of evidence telling us that a vaginal estrogen won't increase the risk of breast cancer. So if you've had an estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, in all likelihood, you probably can use a vaginal estrogen, but it just needs a careful discussion about you, your symptoms, and the type of breast cancer. If you've had tamoxifen, it's fine because the tamoxifen blocks the estrogen receptors in the breast anyway. The only time it was still not quite certain about the safety is if women are taking what we call aromatase inhibitors like anastrozole. They aim to eradicate any estrogen, so it's slightly counterintuitive to give a bit back. But sometimes with a careful discussion with your oncologist, if the symptoms are really, really awful, a short course is sometimes being given. So that's a sort of emerging area and emerging science. So it's definitely, don't assume that you can't, because you might be able to.
That's the key message, isn't it? Please speak to your doctor. Don't be embarrassed and speak to your doctor. So thanks, Claire. And Eleanor, Claire touched on some of the things that she would recommend and where she'd guide people to you. Can you pick up on some of those? So, on top of the advice that Claire has given around vaginal estrogens, what else, based on your experience, can help people?
Sorry, I just had a moment of everyone freezing. Absolutely right. I think that first stop for me is always chatting to your doctor, to your women's health physiotherapist, to your psychosexual therapist, because they're really good at signposting products that are going to work for you, and signposting to places where you're not going to be wasting your money. But it's worth jumping straight in with the vaginal moisturizers and lubricants. So it's worth noting that a vaginal moisturizer is really there to complement any estrogen treatment you might be getting from your doctor, but it is to hydrate the tissues day to day. So it's going to, the job of a moisturizer is just to deliver water to the tissues, to rehydrate them, and you can use it throughout the day to just to manage comfort levels. Lubricants are designed to increase lubrication for sex, really. So they're designed to be slippier, for really slippy for a shorter period of time, in essence. Now, where I think it's really important is understanding that not all moisturizers and lubricants are created equal. It's about finding products with really good ingredients that really respect that vaginal microbiome, so pH matched to the vagina, and aren't too concentrated. So we're avoiding petrochemicals and things that are actually going to cause irritation. And that may seem like a really obvious thing to say, but for a long time, lubricants were produced to be cheap, but not particularly good for women's health. So as Claire mentioned, the real hero products for me are the Yes range, which I'm sure Trudy will mention as well. But they have I brought them so you can just see, so you're familiar with them. But they've got a great water-based lubricant and also an oil-based lubricant. And a really nice trick that I recommend to a lot of our customers is putting the oil-based on first or underneath. And it won't hydrate the tissue because it doesn't have a water content, but it's a really rich emollient and it will last that much longer. You can then put the water-based either on top, on your partner, on your sex toy, if you're on your own, and the two will then slide over each other. We call it a double glide, but it just means that it's really going to protect that tissue. So if you're finding a water-based lubricant isn't enough on its own, the two in combination is a really nice tip to know. And they can be used alongside a moisturizer. And yes, I've got a lovely moisturizer if you're using that day to day. We also have got another brand called Desert Harvest, which I really like. And it has that same simple ingredients, pH matched to the vagina and osmotically matched to the vagina. So if in doubt, ask your doctor. Those are products I really do like, but if in doubt, ask your doctor or your physiotherapist just to signpost which they recommend, which they think are good products. Sorry, because we just cut out just before I started speaking, but would you like me, Helen, to go on? Is it a good time to go on and talk about a few other things that
Yeah, most definitely. That was great. And Eleanor, I wonder, I think you've mentioned if people are interested in those products, they're on your website. But roughly, do you know if these are available on the NHS as well? Can doctors prescribe them, or do patients need to pay for them themselves?
So that's a really good question. The vaginal moisturizers and water-based lubricants are available on prescription, and they are really simple, cheap solutions for the NHS. And the Yes lubricants and vaginal moisturizers are available on prescription. The difficulty is, and probably Claire's better to sort of jump in, is there are some areas where you find you're really up against it, getting products that can be bought over the counter issued on prescription, and that it's very frustrating for us as on the sort of supply side, because we know how helpful these products can be for women, and if we don't use them, how things can escalate and you can end up needing to get referred on and so on. So it's about knowing they are available and really having to fight your corner a bit sometimes to ask for these products to be prescribed, especially at this time when it's really difficult and life is expensive. We all know that. And you're entitled to these products and they are available. But Claire, you might be able to, give any advice as to whether they are always prescribable.
Yes, it's really tricky. So a warning will often flag up if something is available over the counter, or to say, please ask, please do not prescribe, please ask patients to buy over the counter, or within the X health economy, prescriptions not permitted, or something like that. I mean, it's not a blanket no. It's a discussion. It's tricky. Yeah.
And Carla just reiterated that point here in terms of her doctor saying it's not available. But Eleanor, push come to shove, and if people decide to buy them themselves, how much do they cost?
So 100 millilitres would be about £11.99. So, you know, a moisturizer you might be using daily, and a lubricant then using when you're having sex. The oil-based really does go a long way. So a little goes a long way with that, because it's that rich emollient. But you know, these are daily use products, so I do understand the cost, you know, the cost implications. But they are, if you go on the Yes website directly to Yes, I know if you sign up for their newsletter, they do sort of once a month, they'll suddenly have a good sort of 20% off or something. And I'll leave a code with you today for my menopause centre, and the for a discount code for us. So it's about looking out for that as well, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Eleanor. So that's really helpful to know what you recommend and where you can get it from. What are the other products?
So some other things. Yeah. So when I started Pelvic Relief, I just wanted to create some really good products that I really liked, that I knew the clinicians recommended, and sort of put them all together under one roof. So the majority of customers who come to us find us through clinicians. And something your doctor or your physio or your psychosexual therapist might talk to you about are dilators. Now, dilators are graded, so they are devices that come in a sort of grade. They go up through a range of sizes. They start really small, so this is size of my little finger, and then they go up in size. And the idea of dilators are to stretch initially. So you have a stretch. Now that might be related to a bit of scar tissue formation. It might be caused by constriction because of dryness. So there may be a physical stretch. The other thing that going up through grades of dilators does is, as Claire talked about earlier, when there's a painful stimulus, so when sex or penetration has become painful, there is often this constriction of the muscles. Now, we're not with dilators trying to push against strong muscles. That's not the plan. What we're trying to do is remind the body that this sort of stimulus doesn't have to be painful, and allow those muscles to relax. So for the majority of people I'm recommending dilators to, I would say this is about down training that system, reminding your body that this isn't painful. And how you use dilators in that sense, always loads of lubricant. Let's have that as a background in our minds. Loads of lubricant, that goes without saying. And then you start with the smallest dilator, and you get yourself in a position that's really comfortable, often lying down, perhaps a pillow under your knees. Some people like to do it in the bath, or, you know, where you're really comfortable, where you're not going to be interrupted. Practice some deep breathing exercises. So we need to get that diaphragm involved, which is linked to the pelvic floor. So if the pelvic floor is this basket of muscles in the pelvis, we've got the diaphragm underneath the rib cage there. So you practice your deep breathing exercises, and then you use the smallest dilator, never pushing through a point of pain, but trying to teach your muscles to relax, trying to recognize that this isn't painful. And if that isn't painful, then you can move, as time goes on, through the grades of dilators, so they can get bigger and you can get to a size that you feel comfortable with, if your goal is a smear test, or if your goal is penetrative sex with your partner. and so it's learning to use them like that over time. So they're a really nice sort of option to know they're out there. And I think if you're prescribed them, or you're given them by a doctor or recommended them, it's about really understanding that this isn't about stretching through pain. It's not about pushing and, you know, trying to get a physical stretch always. It's about trying to relax the body and slowly change that stimulus. Does that make sense? Yeah. And the dilators that I have at Pelvic Relief are soft and they're silicone, so they're really gentle. So you may be given, or you may have seen, some hard plastic dilators, which are the ones that sort of come in a pack that are all stacked on top of each other. And these are just softer, kinder alternatives. They can be warmed up in warm water. They can be cooled down. So I just really, really like them. They're just much kinder than traditional alternatives. And they can be bought individually or in sets. So that's the sort of dilators. But if there are any I've just seen a question pop up actually, and it's that inserting and removing Tampax. And actually this is where, again, using dilators is really good to work with. You know, for some people, the goal might be trying to use Tampax. With Tampax, I find it's often the dryness of the material that is difficult. So absolutely use lubricant with that. You can, I'm going to show you a couple of vibrators, but it's, you know, to make sure that using a tampon doesn't become stressful. You're anticipating pain, and then you also get this muscle involvement. So we're then back into that cycle. So it's worth taking a step back and either using, I've got some vibrators I can show you and things like that, or using these trainers before, making sure you're relaxed, lying down, and then putting the tampon in with lots of lubrication, rather than going straight to the tampon if the last time you did it was painful. I know that's not practical to do every time you need to change, but it's about reframing it in your mind to make sure we don't get this muscle involvement. Lots of lubrication, and really making sure that you're at the end of a period trying to avoid using a tampon which remains very dry, because I think that's unhelpful. Would you agree with that, Claire? Is that?
Yeah, I think the issue is if you've got vaginal dryness, and by definition, tampons are designed to be super soaky and absorbent. It can be really painful. It's friction, isn't it? So yes, if there's hardly any bleeding left, you're trying to pull out something in a dry environment, and that can be really uncomfortable. So using like the minimal, tiniest tampon, if you want to carry on using a tampon, or just use a panty liner, just, you know, use a tampon for the heavy flow if you're worried about that, because you just don't want that awful negative feedback.
I really like, I have recommended a couple of our customers trying the Moon cup or a menstrual cup instead of a tampon, because you get that same sort of freedom with it, but if you use it with plenty of lubricant. So these are menstrual cups. They're silicone cups that sit in to catch any menstrual flow, and they're easier to remove with lubrication. So that's a really nice alternative if you're looking for the freedom, but you don't want to use tampons, or it's really uncomfortable. But yeah, it all comes back down to dryness, which is really difficult, because of course that's, you know, it is very difficult to manage.
I think that's a really good point, Eleanor. I think so you know, when I was having periods and started periods, the Moon cups I'd never heard of it, but so I have so many young patients in general practice who just use them all the time, even with heavy flow. And when you're having lighter periods, for some women in the perimenopause, you can put lubrication on your finger if you feel comfortable. I think that's a really good idea, actually.
And it's probably something we don't think about
as
often, because it wasn't part of our generational, you know, it wasn't how we just stuck with how we did our periods from when we were 14, and that was it, you know. So yes, that's a good little tip. So the next product I'm going to show you, again, all on the website. So this is something called the Onut. Now, the Onut is a really clever little device. It's a set of silicone stacking rings. So you can see they're really stretchy. And this is when you're getting pain on deep penetration. So if you're finding that sex is reaching a point that's painful, or perhaps you've had a hysterectomy, so you've got a slightly shortened vagina. And what these rings do is they sit at the base of the penis or at the base of a vibrator, and they help control penetration depth. So they make a really comfortable little buffer. That means that if sex is painful when penetration is very deep, it means sex won't reach that point, and then everyone can relax again, and we can try and avoid this sort of tension and anxiety around sex reaching that point. So again, it's sometimes about being guided as to the right product for the right person, but this is a really helpful tool to make sure that sex stays in the comfortable range for you. And our feedback from our customers is that the partners really like this, because there is a lot of anxiety for the partner as well if sex has suddenly become painful. So they find it very comfortable to wear, and it's just a really soft, gentle buffer. Loads of lubricant, and you can have there are up to 4 rings that sort of stack together depending on how deep or shallow you want to go. So that's called the Onut. They do a little device which they come in a really nice little box actually, but this is called the Onut Vibe. So this is another ring, and it can stack with the other rings, or it can be used on its own, and it's got a little vibrator on the side. So it introduces vibration, which is really nice. And I'm sure Trudy might talk a little bit more about vibration, but using a vibrator or using vibration is a really good way to help increase blood flow, decrease pelvic pain, decrease that muscle spasming because of pain, improve the strength of your pelvic floor. So there's really good evidence for using vibration and vibrators. And I know it can be a bit overwhelming, certainly if you haven't ever used anything like that before. So what we try and do at Pelvic Relief is just have some really simple solutions. It's not overwhelming. Doctors are recommending, these products all the time. You're not going to be bombarded with choice. There are some just really good quality, simple solutions as a good starting point to try. So the vibrating ring is pretty new to Onut, and that's on the website, and it's really a lovely little device to go alongside your Onut. And then we do have some very, very discreet, simple vibrators on the website. So this is our clitoral vibrator. It's very soft, silicone. It's really quiet, waterproof. It's rechargeable. It has a number of different settings. So for external use, for clitoral stimulation, there's just vibration around the whole of the vulval area, loads of lubricant always, excuse me, but that can really help with relaxation. And so we love this, and that's called Gwen, that little vibrator. And then we have a longer one, which I don't have with me tonight, but that is also really nice, soft silicone, and it's a flat design. It's bendable, so it's got some nice flex in it. So they're really lovely solutions, especially if you haven't tried a vibrator before and you just want to start. But there's a lot of good evidence around vibrations really helping with pelvic pain, so it's a really good option to consider.
And Eleanor, there's Agnes has asked a question if vibration can help with period pains as well.
Claire might be better placed to answer, but I would say that if that period pain is related to muscle spasms, then there is every chance that it will help. I don't know, Claire, if you've got any direct experience of that. It's not something I've come across.
Claire, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry, failed the intelligence test. Yeah, so period pain is smooth muscle spasm due to release of prostaglandins, and I'm not sure. I have to say I wouldn't know. You wouldn't want to create muscle tension. I think a lot of pelvic pain can be caused by muscle tension in the pelvic floor, and that's where vibrators probably have a better place. I haven't come across any evidence one way or another as to whether it would help period cramps. Yeah, I think you might have to be a bit careful.
It is always, because when you first hear, you think the vibration it's counterintuitive to say that causes relaxation of certain muscles, but what it does is encourage the right type of contractions. It gets those muscles working in the way we want them to, the blood flow in the way we want it to, the arousal in the way we want. So actually it sort of corrects what's slight when you've got that pain response, a bit like when you've hurt your neck and your whole back and shoulders feels like it's in spasm. We want to release that sort of dysfunctional spasm and get back to how it should be working, which should feel good.
Brilliant, thank you. Eleanor, is there anything else that you want to share with us or to show?
No, we have got a couple of exciting products just coming down the line, but they're not about to launch. But that's definitely a watch this space.
Right, watch this space. Well, yeah. Let us know. We'll put out some posts or put it in a newsletter. And share that news.
Yeah, giveaway.
So before I've got several questions for Trudy. Some have lined up here, but just one quick one for Claire. Claire, there's a question here for Christine. I wonder if you could help with, and then Trudy, we're going to come to you to talk about sex, why it's so important, and what we can do about loss of sex drive. But Claire, if you could maybe take a look at Christine's question and share your thoughts.
Yes, hi. Yeah, no, Christine, thank you for your question. Using estrogen pessaries, no HRT, previous breast cancer, using the moisturizer and the yes oil-based water lubrication, but it's still painful, particularly deep inside, but also has a history of lichen sclerosis. Yeah, so Christine, I think if you haven't had an examination of the vagina, I think that would be a really important first step. So a really gentle examination by a doctor just to see what's happening, because often the vagina can be incredibly delicate, and up towards the cervix, it can be very delicate also, because the walls of the vagina can start to become really close together, and sometimes even stick together. So I think it would be really important to see your doctor and have an examination. Lichen sclerosis is a disease a little bit like, it's not eczema, but it's a bit like eczema in that it's an immune system response to your own tissue. And it causes incredibly intense itching. And again, it's another reason for the tissue to become very delicate and lose the stretch and tear. So that usually causes an issue on the outside, on the vulva, and it often narrows the introitus, which is the entrance to the vagina. So it would be good to see how things are with that, because that's treated with steroid ointment, and it is definitely, you can manage it with steroid ointment. And in terms of probiotics, the evidence just isn't there for probiotics. The thought is, can they help redress the balance of bacteria from the unhappy group of bacteria to a more happy group of bacteria? But I wouldn't go down that route until you know exactly what's going on. So I think I'm really sorry to hear that you're suffering in that way. And I would be speaking to your GP. And when there is deep pain, that's when Eleanor's Onuts can be really helpful once you know what's going on. using an Onut can just limit that penetration, and mean that you can't get us to the painful bit. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Brilliant, thank you, Claire. So Trudy, now that we've established, the gynecological issues that can cause pain, we've talked about a range of ways of treating them. Before we get into loss of libido, it would be brilliant just to hear from you about why sex is so important and the benefits of sex to people.
Yeah, I'd just like to add in as well about what Eleanor and Claire's both said. Obviously, I agree completely. And Eleanor's products are amazing, particularly the small little vibrator as well, because if you want to have penetrative sex with your partner, but you're struggling to keep that arousal, what's really nice about it is it even with the missionary position, the partner on top, it's really nice just to lay and have it around the clitoral area, so it keeps that arousal as well as. But I think what can happen is that, when we're really young, so in our teens or in our 20s, I always try and explain to people is we're a little bit like a microwave. So we're red hot and we're ready very quickly. But then we settle down, we get a house, maybe we get kids, things like that. And then we're more like an oven and we need a little bit more warming up. But unfortunately, with menopause, we're much more like an Aga, where we take a lot more warming up and, we take a lot to get going. But once we get going, girls, we're not doing too bad and we can keep going for quite a long time. Well, if anything, it takes a long time as well. So having the good products is really important. And things like the lubricant, have the bottle open already on the side. Definitely the Yes lubricants every time, and that double glide technique, using the two together. And rather than think, just start, I just put all my lotions and potions on, kind of, I'll put you some on, you put some on me, and use it part of the foreplay. Because I think sometimes when we've got our busy lives and we're all in our 50s working harder than we've ever done, we're, apparently 50 is the new 30. I'm still not quite feeling it, but apparently so. As you get into bed and it's late at night and you think, we've not had sex in ages again, and maybe we should do it. And so we cut to the chase. And so all that nice foreplay, the kissing, all the things that help us with natural lubrication, we rush. And then, of course, we're not lubricating like we used to do. So it can then feel uncomfortable. And we get into that pattern of, it's a bit uncomfortable, but I'll be okay in a minute. And then the next time it stays in the memory with, I hope it's not uncomfortable like last time. And then we get in that vicious cycle of it. So I would definitely recommend estrogen every time, localized estrogen. Talk about the lady with the lichen sclerosis. I've just had a patient where we've used Ovestin internally and externally as well. Huge difference it's made to her, alongside using the Dilators and also the Onuts that Eleanor was talking about. Perfect for that kind of situation. Because we know that sex is good for us. It's good for our mental health. It makes us sleep better. It does reduce menopausal symptoms as well. Apparently we lose a few calories when we have an orgasm. So maybe not enough to make up for, half a sugar in a cup of tea, but never mind. We know it's good for cardiac health as well. And it releases good endorphins. And it's okay if couples don't want to be sexual, if that's agreeable to both. But I assume the many people who are on here this evening are here because they do want to be sexual still with their partner. We know it has less divorce rates, everybody gets on better. And if we're being sexual, we tend to then have more quality time together. We want to do things with our partners as well. And I think that's the same both with heterosexual and same-sex couples. It's not any different and get two menopausal women together. Wow, that's a real toughie, especially when you've almost got a competition whose symptoms are the worst, But, also it helps us look younger and behave younger. So we know having that connection, it's that one thing we do with somebody that quite possibly, if we're in a monogamous relationship, that we don't do with anybody else. It's our intimate time. It's our adult playtime as well, which is really good. So sometimes it's quite nice to maybe stop penetrative sex for a little while, get back to good old-fashioned basics, kissing, touching, exploring each other's bodies, and think, actually, what do I like? How do I like to be touched? Where do I like to be touched? And to just start afresh. So I'm all on for HRT. I certainly would not want to live without my HRT, but it's not everything. So using the vaginal moisturizer in between, using the lubricants when you're being sexual, introducing toys as well. Some male partners can be a bit panicked about vibrators, thinking they'll be made redundant, but those smaller ones are really nice, Lots of people have heard of the rabbit because it was on Sex in the City. But actually, when you say to women, which part of the rabbit did you like? They all talk about the ears because it's the clitoral stimulation as well. So, you know, using a smaller, quieter vibrator that's for clitoral stimulation is really, really good. And for pain. So it does help, we know, with pain when we're sexual. So start off very slow, almost like a massage feeling to it, and gradually start increasing. So you may want to go more for the quality rather than the quantity as well. The other thing that the Yes company have brought out is the Yes clitoral stimulant. So it's like on a roller ball, and it feels a little bit oily when it's on, but it warms and again feels very pleasant and can be helpful for women who feel uncomfortable. Sometimes too direct touch on the clitoris can make it quite uncomfortable as well. So adding the lubricant, particularly the oil or the stimulants such as the clitoral stimulant that Yes produce, can also help, because if something feels nice straight away, we relax, and if we relax, of course, we can get aroused. And lots of women will say, well, I just don't feel that desire. And I know somebody's put on one of the questions that they're on everything, the testosterone, everything, and the desire's still not there. And I will say to women, you know, if we wait for a real physical desire to take over in menopause, because we no longer ovulate, we don't necessarily have that ovulation desire where Mother Nature's saying, make a baby, even if we don't want one. So we have to find ways of, you know, if we sit and wait, we'll wait a long time. So we have to think a little bit more about reactive desire. So, responding to something. So for some women, reading a little bit of erotic fiction can be really helpful, just to kind of get the mind into that zone a little bit as well. You know, when 50 Shades of Grey was released, we had our highest ever referrals at that time, because women for once said they felt like they had desire, and then it had gone again when the book had finished. And thank goodness for book 2 and 3. But when you ask the women, what was it about 50 Shades of Grey that turned you on? They said, oh, when he picked her up in a helicopter and took her for lunch. And then he bought her an Audi R8 for her 21st birthday. You know, I said to my husband, if he bought me an Audi R8, I'll build him a red room in the garden, you know. So sometimes we have to think about the romance. And I am stereotyping a little bit, but lots of women do need a little bit more wooing again and a bit more romance back in the life when they hit the menopause. And so attending sex therapy as a couple can be really useful for the partner, whether it's same-sex partner that isn't having the same difficulties and doesn't feel she can understand, but certainly for heterosexual couples, I will see lots of couples where almost the man has been dragged to the clinic and the woman is saying, you tell him how I feel, you tell him what I'm going through, you know. But most men do want to be supportive, partners do want to be supportive, and I think it's about them not feeling that you don't fancy them anymore and that you're going to work on it together and talking about it. Communication is key, really. They are the most important things. If we can talk about it, we can find a solution. So I think that's where the good thing is to start, and then get your date nights booked in, you know, make it feel like you're just starting all over again. Just start afresh and see what.
And Trudy, if you're in a relationship and you haven't talked about this in years, decades, do you have any kind of practical advice or tips for how you can get comfortable, just, you know, those baby steps into starting the conversation?
Yeah, it is. I think I sometimes give my clients a little exercise to do, and I'll say to them, on one side of the piece of paper, I want you to write what either turns you on or gets you in the mood or what helps you feel like being intimate, whatever words you're comfortable with, and write some little lines off it and just sort of brainstorm. And then on the other side, what turns you off? What doesn't get you in the mood? What is putting you off? And then look at all those things and see what can be rectified. Write each other a letter of what might work, message each other, send an email. If you don't feel verbally, you can start with that, then find other ways in which a way that you can. But certainly having a third person, such as a sex therapist or healthcare provider, or if you talk with a third person, particularly in my clinic, what they'll say is, it's me that's going to give those suggestions, rather than, I'm probably not going to tell you anything that you don't already know, but it's coming from a different person. Whereas if the partner says, why don't we try a sex toy? It's almost like they're being told what to do. And so then they try it and think, well, that never worked, so what's your next trick? So go into somebody if you can. And so in some areas, sex therapy is available on the NHS. Certainly is in some of the areas I have contracts with a number of NHS areas that people can access, but lots of information online as well. Maybe read together online, look at Eleanor's website online, read Menopause Matters, look at the Menopause Centre's website. There are lots of information available, and you can just share together, ask for that support, talk to each other.
And Claire, before I come to you in a moment with a few questions, because unbelievably we're down to our last 5 or 6 minutes, so the time has flown by. Trudy, what are your thoughts around the whole concept of desire and arousal and scheduling sex? Because some people feel that the whole idea of scheduling sex is a turn off. It's not romantic, and couldn't see it working for them. But what are your thoughts when you're speaking to your patients?
You can turn that around a little bit into a positive, because we all talk about spontaneity and wanting to be spontaneous. If I had £1 for every time I've heard that word, I'd be a millionaire. So we all want to be spontaneous, but I think spontaneity takes great planning. You have to find a space somewhere to be spontaneous in. So, arranging a date night, hopefully, it ends in sex, but you've had a lovely date beforehand. Maybe gone out, had a couple of drinks, maybe had dinner, or you just dress up and sit at your table. So a bit of self-care, doing things that make you feel nice, that you can do for yourself, is just as important, even down to what underwear you wear. I always say, don't save anything for best, because either it doesn't fit, or it's gone out of fashion, or if it's beauty products, they've gone off, So use your nice things and think to yourself, I'm worth it. Because if you feel good, the idea is you'll be good with that other person that you're with. That's just as important. So scheduling dates or time to be intimate can be seen as a real positive, because, when you're having a tough day and it's Wednesday, you think, oh, roll on date night. And maybe you have a massage for 10 minutes each, or, whatever works for you. It's doing those treats as well as sex. It's not all just about the sex, it's about the intimacy as well.
Thank you, Trudy. They're brilliant and also really practical tips. And I just love the colourful way that you describe it. It makes it so memorable. It's brilliant. Claire, what are your thoughts? When patients come to you and they're really struggling, with their libido, and it's something that they want, what advice do you give them? So there's obviously the brilliant advice that Trudy has given, but what other things do you ask them to consider, or would you recommend?
Yeah, I think so. Getting to the nitty gritty is often really important of what really is going on. So I speak to many women in the menopause transition who their mood is flatter. All of those menopause symptoms can be just battering your confidence. Motivation might be lacking, and it's a bit like going for a run. Starting off the whole sex thing does need a bit of motivation, and often that is the issue. And it's not just related to sex, it's relating to exercise and other walks of life as well. So get to the bottom of menopause symptoms, being able to give advice about ways of managing them, whether it's HRT or not HRT, and then seeing if that helps. And you know, so from my medical doctor perspective, I would talk about testosterone, which we know can, for some, not all women, help with desire. It can help heighten arousal. The research, I do talk about expectations, and so the research was for testosterone was done on women with zero desire and zero response to any sexual stimulation, and about 2/3 of those responded by one additional sexual thought per month. So testosterone is often not going to be the magic bullet. Actually, what many women need, management of menopause symptoms, and a little bit of Trudy and Eleanor as well, to sort of just help mix things up again in a long-term relationship. So I would talk about all of those things. If somebody wants to try testosterone, we will try testosterone. And for some women, it can just be that extra missing little bit that just makes the difference. But every single woman is different, and every pattern of symptoms is different. So it's a lot of listening and trying to tease out what's going on.
That's great, Claire. So I guess the key takeout is it's different for everyone, but it's usually just not one solution. There's a range of things to look at, whether that's, you know, using HRT or testosterone, some of Eleanor's product, or Trudy's brilliant advice, or maybe seeing a sex and relationship therapist with your partner as well. And to the person who just posted, thank you so much for sharing your experiences after you've had pelvic radiotherapy and using the dilator. It's really empowering to hear positive stories like that and to hear that feedback. And Amanda, I know your question was the first question that we had this evening. I hope that with what you've heard from Trudy and Claire and Eleanor, that's answered your question and giving you some ideas about things that you can do to boost your libido. So I think we are almost, yes, we're done with time. So I think with that, I would just like to say thank you so much to Trudy and Claire and Eleanor. Again, another brilliant session with loads of really great and empowering advice. Thank you so much. And now back to AD.
Thank you so much, Helen. Such a great event. So thank you all, and as always, some wonderful advice. So thank you to Helen and Dr. Clare and to Eleanor and to Trudy for this evening and for answering so many of our members' questions. And of course, thank you to all our members, as always, for joining us too, and for all the great questions that you've asked as well. We hope you found it really helpful. If you'd like further information or would like to speak to the experts, please feel free to contact hello@mymenopausecentre.com. And following the event, you will receive a link to the recording in case you'd like to share it or rewatch it. So good night, everyone, and thank you all again, and enjoy the rest of your evenings.